7th of April 2023. I am Councillor Jeff Jones and I will be chairing this meeting of Planning Committee. Just to make you all aware, today's meeting will be recorded. Can I also welcome any members of the public and press to today's meeting? Can I kindly ask you to observe the meeting only and not speak or participate? Registered speakers will be brought in at the appropriate time. Please ensure that your phones are switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Members, please could I ask you all to raise your electronic hand via Teams or physical hand if attending in person, should you wish to speak or ask a question. Those in the council chamber, please remember to use your microphones when speaking. I will now move to Agenda 1, Chair's announcements. I can confirm I have no announcements to make. Agenda Item 2, Declarations of Interest. Are there any declarations of interest? If yes, Chloe will forward an electronic version of the form for you to complete and email back to Democratic Services.
I can confirm I see no hands raised, Chair. Is there any raised in the chamber?
No, none in the chamber, Chair. Thank you.
The next agenda item is the minutes from the previous meeting, which are included on the agenda for approval today. The minutes are dated the 28th of March 2023. Does any member have any comments to make on the accuracy of these minutes? Please can I have a proposer and a seconder to approve the minutes?
With members in the chamber using mics, please.
I'll move, Chair.
I second, Chair.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair. I can confirm those minutes have been approved.
Thank you. Agenda Item 4 is there a request for site visits. Are there any members wishing to suggest a site visit on the applications presented today? Or are there any requests for site visits in general? Please also let me know if you wish to call for a site visit at any point in the meeting. Okay. Now we move on to Section A of the agenda, which is matters for decision. Agenda Item 5. The first application we will look at today is application number P2022-1063, site of the former Dufferin Lower School. The report is set out on pages 9 to 48, and this application is recommended for approval. I would just wish to confirm that a site visit in regards to this application was undertaken on Monday, the 24th of April, 2023, as agreed in the last meeting of the committee. I would now like to ask the planning officers to take us through the report.
Thank you, Chair. This is application number P2022-1064 for the development of 43 number dwellings at the Associated Works and new access, internal new road network, landscaping, sustainable drainage, car and cycle parking, including part demolition of the school at the former Dufferin Lower School, Kilkenny Road, Talbot. This application is reported to Planning Committee initially at the request of Councillor Freegard and Councillor Rahman. It's a major development that has generated substantial public interest. And as referred by the Chair, the application was deferred from determination on the 28th of March 2023 at Planning Committee to allow for a member site visit, which was undertaken on Monday afternoon at 2:30 till approximately 3:15. We'll just run through a quick presentation of some of the drawings and the information to give members an overview of the scheme. So this provides an indication of the site location in reference to the wider area. Around you've got Talbot Road and identifying Harbour Way, the train station, and obviously the M4 motorway and the large area of residential development around it. And you can see here the adjoining school site, which is currently in operation. Here's a more zoomed in view of the actual application site. As you see, Central Primary School and Talbot Road. Just for clarification, following the site visit, one of the members of committee asked for information regarding pupil numbers and how many were located within 1 mile radius of the existing central primary school. So currently information provided from education is there's 457 pupils at central primary, of which 379 pupils reside within 1 mile of the school. So you've got some images of the existing building. So this is the existing building fronting Talcott Road. Existing school buildings and access off Devonshire Place. Members will note that this is the access that we went into the site on Monday afternoon. Again, this is the existing and to be retained school building fronting Devonshire Place. Existing school buildings fronting Broad Street, York Place, and then the existing school building shown from the yard within the site. These are the trees on the junction of Talcott Road and Devonshire Place, which I'll refer back to later in the presentation. These are currently protected by a tree preservation order, and the majority of the trees on site, apart from 3, will be retained as part of the development. These are the existing residential properties on 22 Broad Street adjacent to the existing school buildings. Members will note that we identified this on a site visit. Again, these are some views along the roads bounding the site. And this is the proposed layout plan. You've got the new access point located on York Place. Referring to the site visit, we stopped at this location, identifying where the boundary wall would be taken down and set back. You've got the public open space and play area to the bottom corner of the plan there. There's an informal open space area plus a area of formal children's play that will be open. That's covered by the Section 106 agreement should the application be approved. Identifying the 3-storey apartment blocks. So all the rest is 2-storey. As members are aware, we stopped at this location to identify the exact location of the 3-storey block that was fronting that highway. The 2-bed apartments and the mix of 2- and 3-bed houses. So in terms of the total mix on site, we've got 18 1-bed apartments, 6 2-bed apartments, 8 2-bed houses, and 11 3-bed houses. 25% of which will be secured as affordable housing through the legal agreement, as in accordance with our policies and supplementary planning guidance. Members were aware that we discussed the retention of the boundary treatments bounding the site. So we've put a plan in here as agreed on the site visit to identify those. So the reclaimed stone, this is where it's set, the existing wall will be taken down and set back using the existing reclaimed stone. The existing walls to be retained, and the existing walls to be retained, but in some areas lowered in height. These are proposed landscaping plans. You see the majority of the trees located to the bottom corner of the site are to be retained, and as I touched on earlier, a temporary emergency TPO was put in place, which is being confirmed today. Identifying with the play area and the public open space with SUDS. For those of you that are unaware of those, that's a sustainable urban drainage system. Retain trees. We put this in to give you an indicative massing model. So this is obviously a 3D imagery, so it's not, it's a computer generated just to identify the differences between the existing buildings and the proposed. In here, we've got the proposed street elevations. You'll see the elevations onto York Place, the internal access roads. Again, York Place, the internal access roads, and the block onto Talcott Road, and you will note the 3-storey block there as identified on the bottom section. This is a plan again through the section of the site. You will note the top section, the existing building that we stopped at, and we identified where the 3-storey block would go is identified there on the right hand on the top corner. You'll see the red block is the existing building, and as we identified on site, the ridge height of that is approximately the same height as the wall, with then the roof sloping back beyond that. And then you've got the properties on the opposite side of Telecanna Road identified on that section. So we've got some typical elevations then of the blocks. You've got the proposed 3-storey apartments, 2-storey, 2-bed walk-up apartments. Again, all similar type of designs, a variation on theme. Proposed 3-bed houses. And this is the building that was to be retained that we stopped at, which is to be converted. And that concludes my presentation for you today, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. We have registered speakers for this item. You will have 5 minutes to address the committee. Democratic Services will be timing you and will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining, and then your time has ended. Can I please call on to speak in objection of the application, Craig Thomas?
Opportunity to speak.
Sorry, Chair. Mr. Thomas, it's a bad line. If you'd like to move closer to your mic. Can you test your sound with us, please? Can you hear me, Mr. Thomas?
Yeah, hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay,
That's
if you're
okay.
happy to start, Chair, I'll start the timer now. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I was just starting off by thanking the Planning Committee for attending site last week to view the applications and consider the objections raised by the local residents. I think it's fair to say that the local residents are supportive of the redevelopment of the site, but in a more sympathetic manner, as we've outlined in our objections. In summary, as I'm sure you're all aware, having read all of the documents, our concerns mainly centre around 3 key areas. The first one being the increased level of traffic, impact on parking, and in particular, impact on the infrastructure around Central Primary School. The second one is a significant change to the street scene, and this can be, I suppose, categorised by the 3-storey walk-up apartments being considerably higher than the existing ridgeline of the roofs, which is without a doubt going to impact on the street scene forevermore for the local residents. And the third one being the impact on the drainage to the area, appreciating that the design does consider surface water runoff by way of SUDS design. We are concerned that the local area is already experiencing drainage problems, which we don't think have been fully considered. In closing, I would just like to ask, in the documents that we've been able to see to date, and when this case was originally listed, there's still a number of items at large, mainly the agreement of the Section 106 and potential impact on future maintenance costs and maintenance liability of the site from the local authority. How can a decision be made when these items haven't been fully thrashed out for everyone to consider before agreement is made today? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Can I please call on Catherine Williams, Managing Director of Q Planning, to speak in support of the application? Thank you.
Good morning.
Just checking, Catherine, all is working with your sound. And
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Thank you. If you're happy, I'll start the timer now.
No
Thank
problem,
you.
Thank you. So good morning, members of the committee, and thank you for your time. I'm Catherine Williams, Director at Q Planning, and I'm the agent acting on behalf of Link Cymru for the scheme. As some background, Link Cymru is one of the largest registered affordable housing providers in Wales and has several developments in Neath, Talbot. They are a very reputable organisation that prides itself on excellent customer service and ensuring the safety and well-being of all of its tenants are at the forefront. The management of these properties, once built, will also be to the highest standard. We undertook consultation complying with all of the requirements of the Planning Wales Act, as well as holding a public consultation with residents of the community. The consultation captured many views of the community, and we were grateful for their feedback. This application has attracted a lot of interest locally. The scheme provides 100% affordable housing for those that cannot afford to buy a home, which is greatly needed. It has parking provision in line with planning policy, and it also has a dedicated area of open space, plus a play area for the local community in an area which has a significant deficit. The school has been closed for over 2 years, with education re-provided elsewhere in the ward. This is a residential area, reusing the site for affordable housing, which is accepted in planning policy, and officers support this. The mix of units proposed has been informed directly by the housing waiting list provided by Neath Talbot Housing. The parking provision provides for 2 spaces per 3-bed units, 1 space per 2-bed unit, and 9 spaces for the 18 one-beds. Again, this is policy compliant. In relation to the design, the site layout responds to the constraints of the site, fronting the dwellings onto the existing roads, replicating the terrace streetscape. Internally, there are dwellings that front the entrance of the new internal road, providing a focal point. Only 1 new vehicular access will be created from York Place, allowing the buildings along the southeastern boundary to be retained. New pedestrian accesses from all boundaries are proposed, ensuring sustainable connectivity to allow the local community to access the open space and play area. The development retains the existing mature trees in the southern corner, and as much as the reclaimed stone of the existing buildings will be reused. As explained, one building will be retained together with a stone boundary wall, which is retaining the site's history, creating a strong sense of place and safeguarding the cultural importance of the site. This ensures the design is high quality and in keeping with the character of the surrounding properties. Distances between habitable rooms of the proposed dwellings and the neighbouring properties are at least 20 metres, ensuring no loss of privacy, overlooking or overshadowing. Residential properties are appropriate in a residential area when considering noise impact, and the lighting within this application will also be conditioned. Therefore, there will be no negative impact on residential amenity. The scheme provides 41 car parking spaces in line with the parking standards. There is ample parking available on all streets around the site. Port Talbot Parkway railway station is only a 10-minute walk, making this a very sustainable location. This scheme will not create additional traffic compared with when the school was in operation, particularly during drop-off and pick-up times. Emergency vehicles will be able to access the site and the surrounding roads. Importantly, highways have raised no
1 minute
objections
remaining.
to either the parking provision or the new access. Link have worked closely with officers to agree the amount of public open space, which is considerable, and providing dedicated play equipment to serve the local community. To summarise, the scheme will generate a vacant site, deliver 43 new homes, have no negative impact on amenity, no harm to the highway network, and is fully policy compliant, and we request members consider these benefits. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Catherine. I will now welcome the local ward members to come in at this point. Councillor Rahman, Councillor Frigard, would either of you like to say something?
Yes, Chair. If I may go first, if that's okay with you.
Yes, Councillor Rahman, thank you.
Can I request, Chair, what I'm about to say may take a little bit longer than 5 minutes. With your permission, can that be accepted?
Yes, okay, Councillor Rahman.
Well, thank you, Chair, for allowing me to address the committee today on behalf of my constituents of the Port Talbot ward affected by this planning application. Members, during my time as councillor representing the Port Talbot ward, I have witnessed many planning applications going through the planning committee. However, the manner in which this particular application has been conducted by both the applicants themselves and the planning department caused me concern. The significant amount of public objections submitted by local residents, I feel, has not been taken into any serious consideration by both Link Cymru and or the planning department. In fact, it seems to me that the objections were all disregarded without any rational reasoning as to the impact this development will have on these residents and the area in general. Chair, we need to make sure that the voices of our community are heard by everyone here today so that this planning committee can come to a right decision to benefit the community, benefit our community. Furthermore, Chair, I totally understand that the background as to how this site was first disposed of and sold to React Services Limited by our council on the understanding of a smaller and more acceptable development, which was both agreed by React and our officers, is irrelevant when it comes to making a decision today. However, Chair, what is relevant is the concerns and feelings of our community that the area this development will impact on. Chair, the points that I would like to raise today in requesting that this application be turned down on planning grounds are as following. Firstly, Chair, I would like to point out, 2 seconds, Chair, I'm trying to get my notes. The highways and road safety. You've all had a look during your site visit last Monday, the surrounding area and the school. Road safety for the children crossing the road from Central Junior School in Broad Street is a major concern. And with the added extra traffic by York Place, the new single access and egress entrance to the site, which is being proposed, will further put children and parents at risk. In terms of highway safety, the traffic impact assessment, which I can question the data, which is based on 2011 census, does not comply with the procedure. The egress and the access to the site by York Place possesses health and safety concerns for the local community with limited visibility on a sloping road. And if I do recall, Chair, at the site meeting, I remember a couple of members did point out that issue. I'm surprised, Chair, that the local highway department has not objected to this development, despite knowing the ongoing road safety issues concerning the school next to the site. We as ward members, along with council road safety officers, have previously met with the school and the governing body on numerous occasions. Even so, the council highways and road safety team agreed and managed to source funding to make alteration to the school site to make it safe. So I would really wish I would really like the road safety officer to comment on this and give their view on how they decided to proceed with no objection at all with this development. The data used by applicant to address the traffic impact assessment is inaccurate. In fact, it's 12 years out of date. The applicant quoted inaccurate data when referring to concerns from public consultation, which in my view, Chair, is misleading. The car ownership and traffic movement is totally inaccurate in the report and does not truly reflect the current situation at all. The next point, Chair, parking. On-street parking is a major concern around this area. This proposed development will further add to this growing issue. There is little, no driveway parking, with many households owning at least one vehicle. Any subsequent increase through additional purchase or people visiting residents will push an already crowded situation beyond saturation point. Excuse me, Chair. Further development on this site will flood the area, with displacing further parking problem into the surrounding street and with adjacent and to the adjacent area. The plan proposes to use on-street parking as part of this development. This is unacceptable given the current parking situation that indicate that there is insufficient parking already available. The proposed development will compound existing parking problem, and as mentioned earlier, the road safety issue, especially being so close to the school. The applicant have used outdated data, made assumption regarding the use of sustainable transport, and failed to fully assess the current level of car ownership and availability of parking for existing residents. The car parking in the area is already extremely constrained, and the proposal has failed to provide this. In fact, Chair, some of the data on vehicle ownership is not correct. Moving on, Chair, point number 3, I like to raise in regarding elevation proposed. The elevation proposed is going to be obtrusive to the surrounding area, and such height does not complement the surrounding area in terms of visual amenity. Previous planning permission granted in the surrounding area, such as the Custom House, the former Talbot Police Station, which is called the TOSAF building, and the Eagle House, which has allowed the development of 3-story building, but these buildings do not face onto local residents' home. Such building should not set a precedent when considering this application, as the surrounding street are of a completely different makeup. Chair, the 3-story flats are incompatible, and they do not complement the 2-story houses that are in the area, and will clearly affect the current street scene dramatically. This will further spoil the street view and intrusive into other people's home. The overlay graphic image, which is in the report, clearly shows that the proposal is overwhelming towards the elevation facing Devonshire Place. And you've seen this during your site visit on Monday. This is clearly fundamentally and detrimental impact on the street and horizon scene. The planned position of the balconies will enable residents of the apartment to see directly onto the homes of residents of Devonshire Place and the neighboring street. This will eliminate their right to privacy. The loss of light and the overshadowing from this new apartment will also affect the local residents. No consideration have been made to reduce the height of this building, as the light and noise from these apartments will affect the overall existing street scene for the local residents. Chair, pursuing the street scene impact, this area has been accustomed to this view for well over 100 years during the life of the school. This development will seriously affect the view of all properties, no matter how small the height increase will be, and its overbearing nature. Chair and members, before I conclude, can I just point out that I'm not against the principle of housing development, nor single occupancy use apartment, or in fact, social housing. I am fully aware of the local social housing needs and have a good understanding of the impact it has on people's lives, of those who are struggling to find a suitable accommodation. But this application fails on its street scene impact, it fails on highway safety, it fails with lack of sufficient parking, and it fails our community. Finally, Chair, can I say that I would urge committee today to take into consideration of the significant, valid and legitimate objection and comment raised during the consultation process and consider refusing this application. The recommendation from our planning officers are just a guidance. It is you who will have to make the final decision, not just based on planning policy, but by the needs and concerns of our community. Chair, thank you for allowing me to speak today. At this point, I don't have anything further to say.
Thank you, Councillor Rahman. Councillor Freegard, have you got anything to say, please?
Yes, Chair. Thank you, Chair. And I would hope that you'd grant the same courtesy in terms of time for me to speak as well, if that's okay, Chair.
Yes, Councillor Freegard.
Thank you for letting me speak today. As you can see from the responses submitted from this planning application, you can clearly see the strength of feeling against this particular development, and understandably so, given that the site was originally sold to React and an agreeable development negotiated with councillors and the local community. The whole transaction, Chair, raises serious concerns about how the land was sold and the lack of control of how the land was sold on when we had agreed for elderly bungalows and assisted living, which, given the vision for the future, would have been so impacted positively on social care in the future. The entrance for that was also off Devonshire Place and not where it is now. So I would say the residents, we are in favour of a development there on this site, but there are too many significant concerns about this particular development as proposed. It's also disappointed that Link Cymru and Q Developments, whilst being grateful for our concerns and our suggestions, have not taken on board any concern or constructive suggestion proposed by the residents in the public meeting. One of our biggest concerns is the huge increase, as Councillor Rahman said, in traffic and the increased risk to children and parents using Central Primary School with the access and the egress off York Place. This is the main thoroughfare between the two sites by Central Primary School, as you saw in your site visit. This is in contradiction to the LDP 2011 to 2026 Parking Standards Supplementary Planning Guidance, October 2016, 2.3.4, Policy TR2, Design and Access of New Development Proposals, will only be permitted where all of the following criteria are relevant and satisfied. Number one, the development does not compromise the safe, effective and efficient use of the highway network and does not have an adverse impact on highway safety or create unacceptable levels of traffic generation. This proposal fails to meet this criteria. As well as that, I was totally shocked to find out that the road safety manager, Joyce Neath, had not even been consulted prior to this application being recommended regarding the increase in traffic that this development would bring. So you can understand our concerns about safety in this regard. My following points, I would like to come back, if I may, on parking later, but my following points were to include the play park. A play park was not on the original plans, but was promised in the public meeting, put on amended plans, wanted to use money from another development in the area to pay for it. I would challenge the reference also to substantial open space within the context of this report. The open space offered is not substantial by any means. Negotiation of the provision of an in-site play area on-site delivery of this open space is considered to be acceptable as an alternative to developer contributions. But there is controversy over who is paying for the play park maintenance and whether or not this would be a long-term pressure for the council. This was not even been decided. So the ongoing management of the play area is still being discussed and not sorted yet, even though there's a recommendation to approve this planning application. So I would go back to the discussion around the sewer. I would like to know who actually approved from Welsh Water that the sewer is adequate to take this new development. I understand that the comeback on this is going to be about SEDS, but this isn't appropriate for this type of development. We need to know that the sewer is able to take the extra capacity from this development. So I'd like to know really who from Welsh Water did approve this and how they came to approve it. In terms of parking, I would bring up a new development that has arisen in terms of the plaza, where we were promised parking for the plaza behind the British Legion. Even though that's not our land, there was going to be negotiation. So this does impact the whole area there, where we are now going to be faced with even more parking. And as can be seen from Councillor Rahman's and mine correspondence with Highways, the number of surveys we have in this area for residence parking is immense. It is absolutely immense. We do have a parking problem issue. So please, I would ask that you take into account the parking issue here and what has been said about data not being current. And I would ask you to just be aware of that. These are just a few of the concerns that we're able to mention within the time constraints. But thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak a little longer. The residents do deserve better consideration, and I hope that you will give them your full consideration and take into account their valid concerns. They are not against a development on this site, but they are against the development in this form on this site. And I would just like to say thank you for listening there, but I would like to come back on two other points that officers made earlier. One was about the school traffic at the moment. As we know, schools change. We're going into green energy and looking at the future with climate change. We are trying to encourage children to walk to school, to ride to school. These things need to be taken into account when we're looking at safe routes to school, which I don't believe has been done and certainly isn't in the impact assessment. And I would also like to ask that it be clarified about a temporary TPO. I think Chris Davis actually said temporary TPO. So I'd be grateful if they would expand on that. But thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak. And I do hope that you would turn down this planning application and really do consider the views and the concerns of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Freegard, and I hope you get well soon. I'd like to give officers a chance to answer the ward members' queries before I move on to questions from the committee members.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, thank you, Mr. Thomas, for coming and speaking today. It's not very easy to do public speaking, as we're all aware. So thank you very much, and we'll try and cover off all the points from yourself and both the local members. As I said, on the technical issues in relation to highways, I'll bring in my my colleagues from highways to answer any specific technical issues. Just to cover off a few of the items. In relation to the TPO, obviously there was an emergency TPO put on in place that has gone through that process. So it initially puts protection straight away as soon as that's issued. There was agreement by local members yesterday to confirm that TPO, so that TPO is in place. The process in terms of if planning permission was granted, that TPO stays there. Obviously, there are, I think, 3 trees identified on the site which would be taken down as part of this proposal. But obviously, just having conditions on a planning application to protect trees is more risky. That's why we took the call to put an emergency TPO and get that confirmed, which should be in place today. In relation to the process in terms of consultation with the public, the applicants obviously undertook their PAC process before the application was submitted as required. And we obviously undertook our own consultation process, and obviously all objections and comments that have been received have been set out within the report. The issue in relation to Welsh Water and the SARBs, I thought is probably worth touching on. Obviously, we've had a response from Welsh Water. I can't tell you the person's name who responded, but it's a statutory consultee. We can give you sight of that if you wish to have sight of the consultee response. In relation to their reply, you will note there are conditions placed on the planning permission that require it to be connected to the main sewer. They also require no surface water or land drainage to be put into the sewer. Now, one of the main issues that Welsh Water have in older areas is that lots of sewers are combined, or lots of surface water and land drainage goes into the sewer, which causes surcharging of the sewerage system and heavy rainfall events. This combined with the SARB's approval process, which is separate to planning, will obviously ensure that the surface water element of it is dealt within the application site boundaries in a more sustainable way without having to pipe it into any combined or sewerage system. So I think that covers off the issues in relation to that, but there should be an overall betterment by taking the surface water and land drainage out of the sewerage system. Obviously, if any requirements for improvements were set out within their response, it would have been provided within that consultation response from Welsh Water. To touch quickly on the visual impacts, obviously, yes, any development will cause a visual change to the site. Houses are built, dependent on their styles to reflect modern standards and space standards and requirements. Modern sustainable houses look very different in some respects than old traditional housing. But our view is that it reflects the area, the reuse of the materials. The 3-story element is not unusual in the area. When we visited the site, one of the councillors pointed out a 3-story block, which is viewed from the actual site itself. And in terms of the scale of the buildings on the existing site, some of those buildings have got quite a height to them, albeit more centrally located within the area. But in terms of the 3-story block, there are adequate distances between overlooking and privacy in terms of in excess of our guidelines of 21 metres. We do not consider that would result in any residential amenity from overlooking or overbearing or loss of privacy from any of those developments. I'm not going to comment on obviously previous issues in relation to the land sale. That's outside of my remit. Obviously, we're only here to look at the planning application that we have before us. In relation to the comments made regarding the Section 106 agreement and the play area, it is not uncommon, and members of the committee will be aware that our recommendations sometimes say subject to Section 106 agreement with the following heads of terms. There is a cost and a process associated with pulling together a Section 106 legal agreement, that it can be quite lengthy and expensive. Obviously, the heads of terms will set out the overarching requirements that they would provide. In this case, it's covering off the retention of the 25% affordable housing that's required by policy, together with the open space and play. In relation to the play area, ongoing discussions are taking place regarding the potential adoption of that by the local authority. However, those costs would have to be borne by the developer. So the developer would have to obviously, one, provide the facility of a standard that we would be happy to adopt, and address ongoing maintenance of that for the future. Or the alternative would be that it would be within their, they would have to maintain and retain that park going forward. So the costs associated with that would either be kept with the developer, and the owner of the site would have to maintain it for the public in the future, or there would be some financial contribution for the ongoing maintenance of that, and it would be transferred to the authority. Just to touch on the issues in terms of school traffic and safe routes to school, obviously road safety, as far as we're aware, were consulted as part of the highway consultation, and they offered no concerns. The manager of any section is not necessarily consulted on every single application. They have members of staff that look at these issues for them. The issue in respect of school numbers and where pupils go, I accept. I think we all understand what it's like to live near schools. We all pick up and drop off kids at any one point, and we accept that there is traffic generation and things change over time. However, this application is to address its own impacts and cannot address traffic from adjoining developments. So as far as highways are concerned, this provides adequate parking in terms of its standards and its sustainability criteria. The applicant could actually justify lower parking, but there was an agreement made that higher parking would be required for this location in this standard. What I'll probably do now is if I can bring in my colleague, Joanna from Highways, and she may be able to cover off anything technical in terms of the comments that we made. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. And Joanna?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, in response to some of the issues raised by the local members, the access of York Place has been assessed off the planning policy Wales legislation, guidance documents in respect of technical advice note 18, which refers specifically to visibility, which is one of the main issues that you both have referred to as a concern for yourselves. Currently, York Place has a speed limit of 30 miles per hour, which come the 17th of September this year, as per Welsh Government guidance, we will be reverting to a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit on local residential streets, which include the surrounding streets of this particular site. In assessing the visibility for a 30-mile-per-hour road, we would look for a 90-metre visibility splay in both directions from the centre point of the access. This is taken from a 2.4 metre setback from the back edge of the carriageway, and then the splay is assessed and measured along the near side curb line of the road mentioned. As you're aware, as you are local to the community, this is a open stretch of carriageway that is straight. There is a slight gradient, which I believe you both mentioned, in terms of the vertical alignment of the carriageway, which is a slight slope, which leads from the access road point from Broad Street up toward the access road point of Telcanai Road. In respect of that, it can be achieved in terms of the current build line of the school surrounding building and wall being set back sufficiently and lowered to below the required 1 metre height to enable us to have the visibility splay at the required 90 metres in both directions. And this is all contained within the public highway and doesn't sort of impede into any sort of land that is outside the ownership of the sort of highway authority. Now, in terms of September, this reverts down to 20 miles per hour. The speed and visibility that we look at then reverts down to 45 metres would be the required visibility splay, which can be achieved with ease from the point of access. In terms of road safety, if I could just reiterate from what my colleague Chris mentioned, the Road Safety Unit were consulted in terms of this application. The safe routes to school were identified and were taken into consideration in terms of our highway sort of impact assessment that we carried out internally. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Joanna. Councillor Freegard?
Oh, thank you ever so much, Chair, for allowing me to come back. Yeah, that doesn't address the volume of traffic, Joanna, and that clearly is in disparity with TR2 2.3.4. It still doesn't meet that criteria. So you're bringing up criteria that doesn't actually meet the LDP 2011-16 and the 2.3.4 TR2. the reason I mentioned about the manager of that area there was Joy Smith, because she has been always the one that we've liaised with, because that site is so difficult. There's been such a problem with that site, with safety with the children there. She has always been the one that's been at the forefront of any discussion with that. So I was really surprised that she hadn't been included in something what would be significant in terms of health and safety to the parents and the children and the staff. But I would also say I would like to take Chris Davis up on the offer of the site of the email or correspondence regarding the sewer. So, and I would ask that the planning committee have sight of that as well. I would have thought that these things would be readily available to the planning committee. But I still find it difficult to believe that we're looking to recommend an application where we haven't all the details, Chair. I mean, if the play area hasn't yet been decided and the link haven't yet said that they're going to be culpable for all costs going forward, we're looking to approve something where we still haven't, signed and sealed off everything, dotted the I's and crossed the T's. So I would ask, why are we rushing to do this before having everything sorted out? Thank you.
Thank you. Could I bring Chris back in, please?
No, thank you, Chair. All documentation is available, as members are aware, to all members and the public. Anyone can come in and have a look at copies of the information. As I said, we can provide that to you, but it's a standard response, which if you see the conditions and the notes added to the permission, all of the comments that have been raised have been set out within it. And obviously they are a statutory undertaker who deal with sewerage. They can determine whether or not their network is suitable themselves, and they're aware of any issues more than the local authority would be. In relation to the play area, this is standard practice. This is something that will be negotiated. What members should be aware of is if the applicants don't sign up to the Section 106 agreement, we will be bringing this application back to committee with a recommendation of refusal, because obviously the acceptance of the application is based on what we have before us. Obviously, if there isn't an agreement or the applicant withdraws the requirement for open space and play on the site and doesn't provide a suitable alternative, we will be bringing that application back for redetermination. So, I would make lots of assumptions here, but I assume if the applicant says we're not going to provide a play area and we'll give you a financial contribution instead, we would be bringing this application back to discuss that alternative about whether members are still accepted of that change. But this is standard in terms of how Section 106 agreements are put together. And obviously the detailed design of that play area will be agreed with the relevant officers, the authority who deal and manage with our play areas. And we have a specific officer who deals with play that looks at the types of equipment put in as whether it's suitable for the ages that is proposed for. Thank you, Chair. And I was just wondering if I could bring my highway officer in just to make comment on the reference to out-of-date data that was provided. I think it's probably important just to set out that and the issue in terms of traffic numbers generated from the development. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chris. Joanna, could you reply, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. In terms of the data provided within the transport assessment, as noted, was figures from the 2011 census. Some mitigation was put in place within the document to bring it to a 2020 standard. But again, in terms of 2020, we were experiencing the pandemic. In terms of current data and current information is limited within the area at the moment in terms of surveys that we have access to. In the process of assessing this application, the site was visited at numerous occasions, numerous times of the day, and over various days of the week as well, to make a more informed and current assessment of the highway environment. This has fed into our decision that we were happy with the provisions that have been made in terms of vehicular movements. The site was previously occupied by a lower school, in terms of vehicular movements with a residential development of this sort of size in terms of units is significantly lower than it would be in terms of the times when the school was open and school traffic was utilising the surrounding highway network. So over a 12-hour period, comparison of the two, residential development of this number of units is significantly lower than what would have been in place previously when the school was actually operational there on the site. I'm sorry, what was the other question to cover?
I know that I think that's covered it all. I think,
Okay.
Joe.
Okay, thank you.
I was just going to mention that obviously members should be aware that obviously this application is for a residential development and should address the impact of the residential development. And as I touched on earlier, it cannot address impacts of traffic from other sites or other developments in the area. The site is a school currently. It's had no intervening uses. It can open back up tomorrow in a similar use or many other uses that would be within the same use class or other community uses, churches, other facilities, community centres. We've seen this happen on other sites without the actual need for planning permission. And that would mean that there would be no controls in terms of retention of parking and opening hours and things. So there are certain uses that this site could be put to without planning consent under its existing position. But to reiterate, we accept the site is next to a school. We accept the fact that at peak times there will be additional traffic due to pick up and drop off. We accept the fact that there could be changes in where those children are located. However, there are a large number of children who occupy that school currently that are within 1 mile, so within walking distance of that school. Members went to the site on Monday at a time requested to see what it was like at pick-up time. There was an increase in traffic located in certain areas, but as stated, this development will be addressing its own parking requirements and will not be able to resolve issues outside of that with the school. And obviously that is a matter then obviously for the school to consider how they manage their parking. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Freegard, could you lower your hand because I think you've had enough time now, and I'm going to move on to Councillor Rahman.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The response regarding the data in relation to the traffic impact assessment from Joanne, I'm sorry, Joanne, but I find it quite difficult to accept that. How can such a big development use a 12-year outdated data and seek approval from committee members today? It's beyond my belief, and I just think that Link should have looked at this in more detail and be a little bit more competent in how they submitted the application. Use of data is very important because this could determine how members vote today, and to use an outdated data is unacceptable in my view. So I think that should be taken on board today, Chair. I want to ask the highway officer that with any construction of new access, it limits number of parking. The new access by York Place, I'm sure will limit current parking spaces for residents near the site. Has those spaces taken into consideration at all? And the question for Catherine William from representing Link Cymru here today, she mentions in her address that they have taken on board many views from residents during the PAC process. What views have they taken on board, and what amendment have they made to the planning to address those views? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rahman. I'd like now to bring back in Chris Davis, please.
Thank you, Councillor. In respect of the PAC process, obviously the applicants submit a PAC report that is a public part of the planning application. Obviously, I think residents sometimes and members of the public assume that developers will make changes to developments for the sake of making changes. Obviously, they have to consider whether or not the changes or the things raised are fundamental, that they would think there would be a reason to change their scheme. I think this was touched on the site visit. Obviously, people may have different views on what they think in terms of where the access would be located. But if there was a fundamental problem or issue with the access point, then obviously the authority or through the PAC process, an alternative access could have been located. Obviously, for this site, there are a number of access points currently. You know, every access requires protection on the junction for road safety issues. As we move down to Telkenai Road, you could see that there's parking bays on both sides of that road, and there would be implications on having an access on Telkenai Road, which potentially would result in significantly more off-street parking being removed due to the fact of retaining visibility either side of that parking before you got out into the 2 lanes of traffic. In addition, having an access on the road opposite the school would also potentially cause issues in terms of highway safety. So you could identify issues on any location, but in terms of any protection, yes, it will result in a small amount of off-street car parking being dislocated. However, there are also TROs in place in other areas which are going to be removed, which, as members saw on the site visit, there is a large number of car parking spaces that are unrestricted in terms of time or residence parking that would allow people to park around the site, as there's only one point of vehicular access in and out of this proposal. I'll bring in my highways colleague again just to touch on the information regarding out-of-date data. However, I think it's important to state that when we have the development, obviously we have parking standards. As Councillor Freegard pointed out, we have policies in the plan that refer to highway and pedestrian safety, and we have parking standards. And there are also sustainability points that you can have to reduce the amount of car parking. So notwithstanding any data the applicant puts in, we assess the amount of car parking that's proposed, apply the standards in terms of sustainability data in terms of the location of the property in proximity to other services like schools and public transport, and that then gives them points to be able to reduce their car parking down. As we touched on earlier, they're in excess of what they could provide on this site, which officers considered would be an adequate number of spaces in relation to balancing sustainability and ensuring this site would provide sufficient car parking. But whether or not Joe wanted to come in on anything specific about the highway and the displacement of the car parking. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. And Joanna, would you like to reply?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in answer to your question, Councillor Rahman, it will approximately displace about 5 vehicles that currently park within York Place. That can be still accommodated within York Place. There are areas of parking that is regularly open and free there, and again on the adjacent roads. In terms of the data, yes, the data is for 2011 with mitigation to bring it to 2020 sort of standards, as I previously stated, taking into appreciation the fact we were in pandemic in 2020. I personally carried out independent surveys over a 2-week period to assess the area prior to my comments going back to the planning department in terms of volume of traffic, parking vehicles, and basically the sort of traffic generation to get a feel for it over the whole sort of 12-hour period during the day when the roads are more active. So I personally did that myself. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Joanna. I think we've covered everything now, so could we move on to questions from committee members, please? Thank you. Councillor Karen Clement Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened intently to the debate so far. Just wanted to start by thanking Mr. Thomas and Catherine Williams. It is very strange to come into our world sometimes, I think, and speak so well on what they've tried to represent today. So thank them for their attendance today. A lot of the questions that I've written as I've gone along have been answered by officers, but there's one that I'm a little concerned that I haven't really been 100% convinced on. Is I couldn't write as quick as Councillor Freegard was speaking, but she mentioned the LDP 2011, I believe, only be permitted where all criteria are met, and then she read there was a list of them. And then I was writing down as she was speaking, so forgive me if I'm not 100% correct, but it was 2.3.4 TR2 on parking standards. There was something about that, and saying that this criteria wasn't met. What are the criteria in specific to 2.3.4? Have they been met? If it's ambiguous, if we were challenged legally following acceptance of the planning application, what would we, are we 100% convinced that we would win that argument? So I would like an answer on that specific point, please, Chair. Thank you. Or yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Chris?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Williams. Yes, as we referred to earlier, the parking standards is a supplementary planning guidance that we've adopted as part of the authority, and there's sustainability. This is the conversation we had earlier regarding sustainability points. So in terms of what the applicants could justify in terms of parking on the site in accordance with those parking standards is below what they're actually providing on site. So it is in compliance with our parking standards.
So what does 2.3.4 actually say needs to be met?
It's the parking standards that we've adopted as part of the authority. So obviously there's a parking standard which sets out the maximum number of spaces a property could provide. So we've gone away from minimum standards, it's now maximum standards in order to address sustainability. And there are criteria within that policy then that allows for a reduction of parking, depends on its location in terms of sustainability. And as it's set out in the report, a compromise was reached to increase that number on this site due to obviously issues in the area in terms of parking. So it complies with the car parking standards.
Thanks. So, Chair, if I may just sort of follow up, is that okay, Chair?
Yes, Councillor.
Thanks. So you are 100% convinced that point 2.3.4 of TR2 has been met? That specific point 2.3.4 has been met?
In terms of the parking standards, we're satisfied that the development is acceptable, yes, and complies with the policy.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I bring in Councillor Patterson, please?
Thank you, Chair. I have a few points I wish to raise and a few points for clarification as well. Okay, Councillor Rahman mentioned what has been done in response to the complaints. Now, I know that officers go through anything that's said in opposition to any application and then match it with our policies and Welsh planning laws and things like that, blah, blah, blah. So just because somebody objects, it doesn't necessarily mean that things will be changed. I just wanted to make that as a comment. Do you agree with that? That, you know, people can have an objection, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that objection is sufficient to make the application change. Yeah.
Chris?
Yes, Councillor.
We can take it on board, yes, and we can realise that, yes, people are objecting, but Link and planning officers would look at that information and say, well, look, this is the application. Will you judge it on what we're putting in front of you today?
Yes,
Yeah.
and you know, all applications are looked at on their merits in relation to
Yeah.
at least plan-led systems, so it's in relation to the policies within the plan. Applicants, it's, you know, if they choose to change something because they believe that something may address concerns from the public, that would be up to them. Obviously, doing the PAC process, it's not just the public that get consulted, it's a statutory consultees
Exactly.
such as Welsh Water and others. And it may well be that the scheme evolves during that process. Some schemes change dramatically through that PAC process, others don't.
No.
And obviously, as an authority, we undertake pre-application consultation ourselves. We pride ourselves in trying to address all these issues before an application comes in.
Yeah.
So during that process, applications change. Some change quite a lot, some change minimally. In this case, we have had amended plans and the applications have gone back out to consultation. Obviously, some of the objections would have been addressed, all of the objections have been addressed in the report, and some of the objections may have been addressed by the changes that have been made.
Thank you. And also, when people say that they disagree with things that are in the report, for example, the distance between the height of the 3-storey building, they say, yes, you can see. Well, yes, you can see the buildings opposite, but that does comply with our policies of distance and overlooking. Okay, I got another one here, if you bear with me.
Just for members who obviously aren't in the chamber, because we're nodding at each other, yes, that is correct.
I'm trying to establish that when we do come to make a decision, that nobody can actually say we didn't take things on board, because I think I feel an inference from objectors that they feel that they have objected and nothing's happened. But that's not the case, because a lot of things happen before it comes to us today. It's an ongoing thing that may have changed, and as councillors, yes, as somebody said, and I do beg your pardon, that it's only guidance. Recommendations are only guidance. Well, yes, it is guidance to members of the committee, but in order to exercise that right we have to say, actually, we think you're wrong, we have to have a sound planning reason to put forward at the end if we don't want to go ahead with officer recommendation. And I'm only saying this because when members of the public come to view a planning meeting, they may not be aware that is the case. We cannot, as councillors, just say, nah, I don't like this one, you know, sorry, too many people object to it. And that's not to say that we are not taking on board what they say. They do object to it, but is it something that we can change? Will it change our minds and make us override professional advice? So that's that one. With regards to the Welsh Water, they have in effect given some advice that the water runoff from site has to be dealt with in a separate way and cannot go into the sewer system. So they haven't objected to the site. They have said Link have to accommodate that water. They cannot put it into the sewer system, thus not making things worse. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that.
And I'm just going to try and find the actual conditions, but there are a number of conditions that are set out within there that both require the scheme to be connected to the main sewer.
Yeah.
And that is for them and Welsh Water, the developers in Welsh Water, to agree the point of connection.
Okay.
And there are others then that specifically prevent them from putting surface water and land drainage into the sewerage system. And obviously, as we touched on earlier, there was a separate consenting process for the sustainable urban drainage system, which is the SARB's approval process. And obviously, the applicants would need to get SARB's approval in place and that includes ongoing maintenance and management of any features, including swales, etc.
Okay.
As part of that application, and that has to be in place before they start work, or there's separate enforcement action that can be taken under that process.
So basically, they haven't just said, yeah, absolutely, do what you like. It's a question of, yes, it can be dealt with. It's not something that they're just going to agree to.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. With regards to road safety, I don't know if I can ask a safety officer question, Chair.
Yes, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot's been made of the fact that the data is sort of not current, and I think you've explained what you've done. But what do officers do if there is no current data? I mean, you've explained that officers have gone on site several times, but they use their professional judgment then?
Yes. Basically, in terms of doing any type of sort of traffic survey, it's got to be ensured that the site is visited over an entire sort of 7-day period to get a more informed view of what traffic movement is like, the volume of traffic, sort of parking assessments, within the surrounding areas. And in particular, we were looking at York Place, as this is the main point of access and egress from this proposed development. We visit first thing in the morning, sort of rush hour time between sort of 8 to 9 o'clock, especially given the location is adjacent to a primary school. A lot of the children do walk back and forth to school in that area. So of course, road safety is an issue from a pedestrian point of view as well. As we've been on site on Monday, so you'll be aware that there are sort of like red carpet areas, which not enforceable, but do indicate the locations where the children should be led to cross the roads. So there is an element of that there as well. In terms of this new development, the site is permeable in terms of pedestrians. So there's a park area, going to be within the site as well. There could be a lot of sort of pedestrian movement shifted to permeate through this site and taken away off the adjacent streets in terms of what fall in the surrounding area. So in short, basically, we visited the site over a 7-day period, ensuring the school was operational at the time, and we sort of assessed the situation then as the visits were carried out, and we based our recommendations on that.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm not quite finished, if you bear with me. With regards to 106 agreements and how can we proceed, this is standard practice. I know the officers said it, but as members, we also know that applications come through in sort of in little chunks, and we don't make sure that every single T and I is crossed and dotted at the planning application stage. But what we do is make sure that any areas that need further looking into have been mentioned, and there are things in the report that would cover that. So I'm just trying to tell anybody that's listening that we do this. Is a quite routine thing to do, that 106 may be sorted out later. Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Can I call in Rebecca, please, from Legal?
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on that point, I'm the legal officer within the council who drafts the vast majority of Section 106 agreements, not all, but the vast majority. And just to reiterate what you rightly said, Councillor Patterson, it is standard practice for 106 agreements to be done after determination, either by delegated panel or if matters come to planning committee. Part of the reason for that is because we need in that agreement to be putting into legal effect the decision that is made. So if it is that a matter is passed subject to there being 25% for affordable housing, for example, or that they are to pay X amount contributions towards open space, or whatever the obligation may be, that is determined at committee level, and we then put that into agreement. Otherwise, we would in effect, be putting the cart before the horse. It needs to be following what the recommendation and the decision that is made at the appropriate level.
Yeah, I'm grateful for that. And as I say, it is for members of the public and people who have made complaints to clarify the situation, that it's not just, there's no point of, objecting because they're not going to listen. We do listen, and it's all part of the process. I think I'm done for now. Chair, thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Patson. Can I now call in Councillor Ken Phillips?
Thank you, Chair. There's a couple of issues I want to touch on. There are some of the objections that have been received where we have a clearly quantifiable set of standards to be met. In terms of the highways, it has to be X distance and Y angle and so on. Those are quantifiable things that the officers can say, yes, that meets that standard. It strikes me, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, that there is more of a judgment call on when it comes to the issue of the design and whether it fits into the area, sufficiently reflects its situation and so on. That's far less quantifiable. And although, of course, we take on board and treat with due regard the advices of the officers, there is a judgment call there for us to make as members of the committee, according to the standards we have and the project before us. Noting on BE, our planning supplementary guidance BE1, criterion 1 of that says that it complements and enhances the character and appearance of the site, building or area in terms of siting, appearance, scale, height, massing and elevation. And I have to say that at the moment I'm struggling to see how that standard is being met with the design as it is proposed. There are a number of issues. Firstly, there are attempts to reflect the situation. One is using the existing stone. My concern on that one is, what guarantees do we have? Because we're told that the existing stone has to be tested to see if it's actually usable. If it isn't usable, what's the plan B? What will replace it in the building? Do we have any guarantees that will reflect the area? We're also told there's brick in the surrounding housing, and that's quite right. But it is a very distinctive brick used in a very distinctive way. And it doesn't seem to me quite as simple as, well, a brick's a brick, there's bricks, so we can use bricks to reflect it. They're a very distinctive yellow brick, although sometimes some of them have been painted, and they are in distinctive patterns, which there's no attempt to reflect in the design. Also, looking at the bay windows, in the design it says, that the surrounding houses all have bay windows, and they do all uniform bay windows, but the design of the bay window to reflect that could hardly be more different than the existing bay windows that are there. They are all of that sort of rhombus, truncated triangular form, and the proposed bay windows are completely incongruous with that in being in square form. Moving on from that, or associated with that, when we start to look at the 3-storey building as it faces onto Talcott Road, there's none of that bay window element. There's little of the stone element because it can't be used for the elevation. So we're talking about a brick building, which seems to me completely at odds with what surrounds it. There are other brick buildings, but they are several streets away and not within this residential area. Similarly, there is a 3-storey building, as has been pointed out, but that is on the main Talbot Road. And what we have there is a situation where we have the main Talbot Road through town with 3-storey buildings along it, and then an entirely 2-storey residential area behind it. And this is in the middle of that entirely 2-storey residential area. Looking at the site section AA, where it shows the elevations. On the site visit, we were told that the building would be slightly further forward, that three-story building. In fact, it's 50% further forward. It's half. The distance to the boundary wall has been halved, and it's overall about 50% higher than the existing building. That's a very significant and imposing edifice added to the street scene, with no sort of, as far as I can see, no real reflection of the buildings around it. So I'm really seeking guidance on that issue, because we have to make that judgment that it complements and enhances the character and appearance. And I'm really not at the moment seeing any way in which it meets that criteria. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. I'd like to call in Chris, please.
Thank you, Councillor. In respect of the development, obviously any development on a site like this will cause a change, because it's not there to reflect the existing school buildings, and obviously you can't convert the existing buildings into residential and make a viable scheme, so it will result in change. The applicants have obviously attempted to try and retain some of the elements in terms of the boundary treatments, the large trees on the corner with the open space and players, and to obviously reflect some of the elements that are shown in the other buildings. The reuse of the stone is proposed by the applicant, and they've undertaken some testing which has shown that it can't be used at the higher levels on the three-story blocks, but they're pretty confident it can be used. And you will note that condition 19 set out in the condition requires samples and materials. And you're right, we've had many arguments with developers about bricks, and we will continue to do so going forward about what they think is acceptable and what we think is acceptable. But you are building new development within an area where, as Councillor Keogh pointed out on Monday, those houses are 91 years old. We're not here to build pastiches of Victorian and Edwardian houses. We are here to build modern houses that are up to current standards. So it's not going to be a replication of terraced properties or semi-detached properties. There is evidence in the area that you can view from the site of brick buildings. There's lots of rendered properties there. In terms of developers, we're seeing this move away from render, the fact that it doesn't look very good after a few years. It starts getting all tarnished and things. So, I mean, they're looking for something that is robust in terms of maintenance. But I can assure you that when we get the details, we're looking at the samples in relation to the acceptability of the material for the scheme as a whole, but also how it fits in with the surrounding area and is a reflection of what is in the area rather than a kind of pastiche or copy. So I think it would be wrong for us to be asking them to put in bays and elements that are shown on sort of older terraced or Victorian properties onto a new development. I think that would be, so as I said, sort of a pastiche. I think it has to, address its own requirements and be and hopefully with the retention of the boundary treatments and the trees, be a sympathetic addition to the area. In terms of the three-story block, yes, you are correct. It is going slightly further forward to the boundary wall than as shown previously. But in terms of its impacts, you are still looking at 21 metres from front building to front of building on the opposite side, which in a built-up residential area is very rare to be able to get. I mean, we would normally be looking more like sort of 10, 11 metres across a highway where you're having residential properties. And obviously the frontage of properties has slightly less protection than the rear of properties where people expect more privacy. So we're pretty comfortable that it can be accepted that the width of the carriageway there and the scale of the building won't result in any overbearing or large presence within the street scene that would be unacceptable. And that block turns the corner and then fronts onto the open space area. So there's only a small section that's actually viewable from outside of the site. In relation to the scheme as a whole, obviously the authority and planning, Planning Policy Wales and Future Wales all talks about placemaking. So that's why we're insistent on the open space and play, the connectivity between this site and the surrounding neighbourhood, to making sure there's pedestrian linkages and things. So, it is something that we do look at very carefully. But as you say, one person's view of something that they think is lovely, as someone who's about to be a king once said, as someone else's carbuncles. So it is sometimes a reflection of different views and attitudes. However, it is based on large amounts of experience and knowledge, and unfortunately, as we talked about earlier, there are still elements that we are still yet to see. So the applicants will still need to source materials that we consider to be acceptable, and that will be part of the ongoing process post-decision if the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Phillips.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I absolutely, see what Chris is saying, and I completely agree about it. It shouldn't be, and it shouldn't need to be in any sense a pastiche of what is there. But the issue is, it should in some way reflect and fit in and not stand out as an entirely incongruous development. And at the moment, I'm still really struggling, particularly on that 3-story element, to see that it does that successfully. And it is, yes, you're right, it is, one person's carbuncle is another one's, beautiful building. But, it just does seem to me that particularly that very large element imposed on the street scene to be entirely incongruous and to stick out like a sore thumb and not really be what I would call reflective. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. I'd like to bring back in Chris. Thank you.
Yeah, I would draw your attention back to the block plan, and whilst it obviously is a 3-story block, in terms of the scale of the development as a whole, it's a very small element of that frontage that would be taken. And I forgot to mention earlier, as you note from the plans, they're also retaining one of the buildings on the site as well as part of the development. So there are elements of the site. It's not like a clean slate and start again. They are reflecting, trying to retain elements of the existing site to try and kind of blend the development as much as they can into the surrounding area. And something that was raised during the site visit as well, I thought worth touching on, is that obviously it's not listed, it's not in a conservation area. However, Glamorgan Gwent have asked us to put a condition on regarding the recording of the building. As we saw on the site visit, the gentleman who followed us around was very interested in what was happening because he went to the school as a small boy. So they will be recorded in terms of recording the history of the site as part of that condition, and then that will be archived with Glamorgan Gwent. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Phillips, reply.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just on to pick up on one element that Chris said there, and yes, I agree that 3-story block is a small part of the overall scheme, very small compared with the overall scene, but it is very, very large compared with what is there already and what is around it. And I think that is something that certainly I feel that we need to think about. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Councillor Chris James, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, thank the speakers today from the public. Thank you, Councillor Jones, for chairing today because I'm currently out the country. Councillor Patterson's covered a lot of what I was going to say. Thank you, Councillor Patterson. But there's just 2 points of clarification I just want to make sure that all the members of the committee are aware of. With regards to the 106 agreement in the play area, can you just confirm, Chris, that this will come back to committee or at least come back to the council if those aren't met? And the other point was around the bricks we got. Again, if there's problems with them using those bricks, would that come back to planning again? Chris, if we could answer those, thank you.
Thank you. In relation to the Section 106 agreement, obviously it's set out what's being provided. If there is a fundamental change to that, then we would obviously bring that back for reconsideration if we consider that was different to what was determined today. In relation to the materials, as with other pre-commencement conditions and things, we've got delegated powers in order to approve those ourselves. We would obviously just assure members that, you know, it is something that we look at very carefully, and as it's set out, it's providing those samples of materials to look at how they all fit together as a whole. You know, we all of that information, as with any planning application, goes on the weekly list, so all members be aware when we get those details in, and we're more than happy to discuss with the local members the detail of that when they come in, but it wouldn't be something that we would be taking back to planning committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor James, anything to say?
No, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, Chris. Thank you. So we'll move on now to Councillor Cathy James.
Thanks, Chair. Lots of great questions from other people, which have covered most of what I wanted to ask. So I've just got one small detail I wanted to query. Condition 25 asks for the consideration of the provision of 5 EV charging spaces. Will they be included in the current parking provision, or will that be additional to the parking provision?
And no, they will be part of the parking provision. So they we try and require EV charging on all new developments now, but they're not additional car parking spaces. It would be EV charging on 5 of the spaces provided.
Okay.
So there's a requirement for 10% of all the car parking on new developments to now provide EV charging. Obviously, depends on the viability of where they're located. It may well be they put them all in the same place, so it's just to provide the details of that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Patson.
Yeah, it's just for legality, Chair. We don't normally take notice of anything in the chat as part of our deliberations. All the chat is for letting us know if there are difficulties with communications or something like that. I just wanted you to be aware that there is a little bit of chat and that we may be picked up on that. So I just wanted to make sure that we won't be taking that into account.
Thank you, Councillor Patson. No more questions?
I see no more hands raised, Chair.
Thank you. Now moving on to the recommendation, which starts from page 37 of the report. And again, this application is stated as for approval. Could I have a proposer and a seconder to consider the recommendation?
I propose, Chair.
Chris James proposing, Councillor Patterson seconding.
I'll second that.
Chloe, could you please ask each member if they have been present for the whole of this item and now they wish to vote, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So now we'll move to the voting portion in regards to the application. So if I just go through the attendance. Councillor Tim Bowen, have you been present for the whole meeting and how do you wish to vote?
Yes, I've been present for the whole meeting and I'm for the application.
Thank you. Councillor Carol Clement Williams, have you been present for the whole item and how do you wish to vote?
Yes, and yes for.
Thank you. Councillor Heath Davis, have you been present for the whole item and how do you wish to vote?
Yes, I have, and that is a yes.
Thank you. Councillor Rosalind Davis, have you been present for the whole item and how do you wish to vote?
I have been present for the whole item and I'm voting in favour of the application. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. Councillor Cathy James, have you been present for the whole item and how do you wish to vote?
Yes, I've been present for the whole item and I want to vote in favour.
Thank you. Councillor Chris James, have you been present for the whole item and how do you wish to vote?
I've been present for the whole item, Chloe, and I vote for the application.
Thank you. And now to yourself, Chair, have you been present for the whole item and how do you wish to vote?
Yes, I have been present and I vote for.
Thank you. Councillor Carl Jordan, have you been present for the whole item and how do you wish to vote?
Morning, Chloe. Yes, confirm. I have been present throughout the item and in favour of the application.
Thank you. Just to note that we've had apologies from Councillor Dennis Keogh. Councillor Sudan Paterson, have you been present for the whole item and how do you wish to vote?
I have been present for the whole item and I vote with recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Ken Phillips, have you been present for the whole item and how do you wish to vote?
I have been present for the whole item and I wish to vote against.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Sarah Thomas, have you been present for the whole item and how do you wish to vote?
I have been present for the whole item and I support the recommendation.
Thank you. So I can confirm we've had one objection and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
Oh,
9,
could you
10
confirm?
for, 10
sorry.
for, yeah. And I can confirm that application has been approved.
The next application is detailed as agenda item 6 of the agenda, which is application number P2023-01368, land to the rear of 3537 Woodlands Park Drive. The report is set out on pages 49 to 56, and this application is recommended for approval. I would now like to ask the planning officers to take us through the report.
Chair, sorry, just before Chris comes in there, just on your behalf to thank the members of the public for attending today. You're welcome to stay for this application, but you're free to go if you want to as well. So thanks again for your attendance. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for P2023-0168 for works to 5 oak trees as identified, covered by Tree Preservation Order T001A1. It's to fell a number of trees and to undertake works to those trees on land at the rear of 35, 36, 37 Woodlands Park Drive, Cardickston. This application is here today because the applicant is actually a member of the authority, an elected member, so the determination would normally be undertaken at delegated panel level. However, in accordance with our requirements, this has to come forward for you today. This is an indication of the property and the site and the trees in question. So as you see from the report, there's 2 trees to be felled. The remainder of the trees are just having some minor works undertaken to them. The applicant has submitted a tree report, which has been considered by our Arboricultural Officer and considers the works to be acceptable. In accordance with our usual requirements, we've identified conditions as set out on page 54, which restrict the works to those identified only, and that we're recommending approval of that application today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. I will now welcome local ward member to come in at this point. Councillor Rogers, would you like to say anything?
Thank you, Chair. No, I just want to point out that I'm very much in favour of trees. I wouldn't live in Woodland Park Drive otherwise, but unfortunately the land is privately owned. I've gained permission to actually have the survey done and to do any work that's required. They've been allowed to grow out of control, they are, and now they reflect a hazard, a danger really to the houses, the way they've been allowed to grow out. And so really I was trimming back. It's unfortunate that during the survey 2 of the trees are found to be diseased and have to be felled totally, you know. So sorry, the dogs are back in a sec. Have to be felled totally, which is you know, not what I would have wanted, but you know, if they are diseased, then obviously they're going to be more dangerous to us. We've got young children living to one side of me and in the garden, and my grandchildren here as well. I am concerned that if they're allowed to carry on, then we are going to have problems with them in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rogers. I will now take questions from members of the committee. Members, do you have any questions for the officers?
I see no hands raised, Chair.
Now moving on to the recommendation, which starts from page 54 of the report. And again, this application is stated as for approval. Could I have a proposer and a seconder to consider the recommendation?
I'll
Councillor
propose.
Pat-
Okay.
Happy to second, Chair.
Right.
Councillor Patson proposed and seconder is
I'm happy to propose, Councillor Jones.
Councillor Carl Jordan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Chloe, could you please ask each member if they have been present for the whole of the item and now they wish to vote, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So Councillor Tim Bowen, have you been present for the whole item and how do you wish to vote?
Yes, I've been present for the whole item and I propose it. Sorry, I'm for it.
Thank you. Councillor Carol Clement Williams, have you been present for the whole item and how do you wish to vote?
I have been present and I vote for it.
Thank you. Councillor Heath Davis, have you been present for the whole item and how do you wish to vote?
Yes, I have. I would vote for it.
Thank you. Councillor Rosalind Davis, have you been present for the whole item and how do you wish to vote?
I have been present and I'm in favour. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. Councillor Cathy James, have you been present for the whole item and how do you wish to vote?
Yes, I've been present and I vote in favour.
Thank you. Councillor Chris James, have you been present for the whole item and how do you wish to vote?
I've been present for the whole item, Chloe, and I vote for the recommendation.
Thank you. Chair, have you been present for the whole item and how do you wish to vote?
Yes, and I vote for.
Thank you. Councillor Carl Jordan, have you been present for the whole item and how do you wish to vote?
Yes, I've been present for the whole item and in favour of the application.
Thank you. Again, we've received apologies from Councillor Dennis Keogh. Councillor Suzanne Paddison, have you been present for the whole item and how do you wish to vote?
Yes, I have been present throughout and I'll vote in favour of the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Ken Phillips, have you been present for the whole item and how do you wish to vote?
I have been present for the whole item and I wish to vote in favour of the recommendation.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Sarah Thomas, have you been present for the whole item and how do you wish to vote?
I have been present for the whole item and I support the recommendation.
Thank you. So just to confirm, Chair, that vote is unanimous and that's been passed. That recommendation, application has been passed.
Thank you, Chloe. Now we move on to section B of the agenda, which is matters for information. Agenda item 7 detailed the delegated decisions from the 20th of March 2023 to the 19th of April 2023. As Chair, I can confirm that we note the delegated decisions contained within this report. Final agenda item is agenda item 8, which is urgent items. I can confirm we have no urgent items today. There are no further items, so that ends the business for today. Thank you all for attending.